and this meeting is being recorded. We're excited to have our extended Hope family, people from around the world, joining this session, and it's a pleasure seeing all of you and having you here. We're honored to have Vinit Taneja join us today on a topic that excites a lot of people. Discover your innate calling to impact humanity. I think that especially in a time of war and values slipping and sliding all over the world, human principles and human impact matter a lot, and really motivate audiences and people to get focused and learn how to get this work done. A lot of the issue is how to do it. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another to actually get the work done. And Vinit is going to talk about how to get started. How do you find your passion, your beginning, and what kind of frameworks do you use to decide how to do the work? I want to preface my comments or Vinit's comments with one notion that somebody shared with me 10 years ago. And Ed said, if you're a good person, you're a success. So there's a simple way to get started. And then there are broader ways to get started from that precept and that beginning. Vinit, again, has worked with many of the great companies around the world, from Gillette to Airtel, J&J, IQL. He works with leaders from startups all the way through very established companies. We're so honored to have him and excited to have all of you. It's good to see Renuka, Joe, Swatish, Charu, others who've joined us most recently. So let me turn the microphone over to Vinit, and glad to have you from New Delhi, and greetings from Greater Boston to Mother India. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Kind of you. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining in. Quite obviously, this topic has a lot of interest amongst people. And I think before we begin, if I might just request all of us to just take a minute's silence and get centered with our breathing, so that whatever we have come from through the day, we are able to at least be here fully. So just take a minute, sit back, keep your hands wherever they are comfortable, uniformly. Keep your feet also uniform. You can keep your eyes closed or keep them open as deemed fit, but simply focus on your breathing. An in-breath and an out-breath. Be here in this present moment. Let the thoughts flow if they have to, but don't get caught up in them. As you breathe in, notice a little warmth at the top of your nostril, a cooling sensation. And as you breathe out, notice a little warmth right under your nostril on the upper lip. Just stay with it. Yes, that's good. So whenever you're ready, you can rub your hands together, warm them up, warm your face up, and just emerge with a smile. Thank you. Lovely. So before I begin talking about whatever it is that I have to talk about, it'll be a good idea to get some comments in the chat box as to what is your own understanding of the difference between a job, a career, and a calling. Since this is all about finding your calling, it's a good idea to at least deliberate a little bit on that. So just in the chat box, whatever is your feeling, difference between job, career, and calling.
You can find the chat box in the bottom center of your screen, and I realized calling.
Hi, so that you can see it here.
I realized calling was the focus here when we started with a meditation, a breathing exercise. So our first answer is a job is to be paid, a career is to be paid for something I'm doing, and a calling is passion. And then Renu says a job is something you must do, a calling is what you enjoy. Chandra chimes in, calling will pull you, no matter what the monetary benefits are, and other returns. So calling is aside from money, is aside from business, kind of sits above all that. Danny says calling is purpose. Calling drives me regardless of circumstance. We have calling is purpose driven. If your job is aligned to your calling, says Swati, it no longer feels like a job. Those are some of the initial responses.
Beautiful. No, I think thank you so much. So one thing is very clear. There is a difference. At least there is a perceived difference in our minds. And I guess whilst we can have definitions, there is a Kalyan Mitra that I have by the name of Nityashanti that some of you might know. And he provided at one stage with a very interesting definition. He says a job is something that you do with your hands. And it is perhaps something that you do to pay your bills. A career is something where you perhaps use your head and your hands. And it is not just about earning a money, but it's also about growing yourself in the process. And a calling is something where you're using, apart from your head and your hands, you're also using your heart and your soul in a way, which means you're actually deeply connected with something which is way beyond ourselves as well. So I like that. I kind of like that definition, and in a sense, I also subscribe to it. And for me, the question that therefore started, and where my journey started, was quite early in 1992. Well, not early by my standards, because by then I had already worked for about 11, 12 years. But in 1992, I was laid up with a heart attack and I was only 35 years old. And when I was recuperating both in the hospital and at home, my mother handed over a book to me called Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramhans Yoganand. And somewhere I think that stirred a lot of things inside me. I started to think of, what is really the purpose of our life? What am I here for, etc. However, I don't think I really found those answers till much later. And somewhere in the late 90s, I also got exposed to a management philosophy or a approach of balanced scorecard, in which you have something called leading indicators and lagging indicators. So for example, profits are a lagging indicator and customer satisfaction is a leading indicator. And if customer satisfaction is the lagging indicator, then process excellence is a leading indicator. And if process excellence is a lagging indicator, then people's attitude, people's knowledge and skills is a leading indicator. So there is a cause and effect relationship somewhere. And in 2007, this is the time I was actually working in Airtel and I was conducting a training program for them. And I just stepped out and I had a kind of an epiphany, and what really came to me was, don't go around looking for purpose. Instead, go around figuring out what is your passion, which means what is it that you do when you do it, time just stands still for you. To me, that's the definition of passion. So, what are you really passionate about? Because this is something that has been seeded in us. It's something that we have perhaps carried in our soul as we took birth. And it is only a matter of uncovering it and discovering it rather than developing it. You can still develop it, but there is an innate passion which is there. The other thing is to discover your core proficiency. What is core proficiency? Core proficiency is not what you're good at. You know, many of us who are intellectually good can possibly find that we can be good in many things. But the key thing is to figure out what is it that you're naturally, spontaneously, and effortlessly good at. So, just to make it easier, I started calling these thrill and skill. So, I said, our journey of finding our purpose, and I call purpose the divine will, otherwise, you can call it purpose if you like. Some people love Kotler's 4 P's, so you can use the P's as I'm saying, which is passion and proficiency. So, this is where I started thinking about my own passion and my own core proficiencies. I realized that even as I was growing up and I was in school, I was quite fond of teaching. Um, and more than fondness, I had a certain patience about it. My mother would sometimes tell me to teach my younger sister, and you can imagine how difficult it is to teach your own sibling. But of course, I would crib, but I found some level of joy in that. And so I started to feel that something about teaching is sitting well with me. It wasn't even about being good in it, but it was about being passionate about it. So when I went to college, my MBA, I actually became a teacher in statistics. I found myself teaching people till midnight before even starting work on my own preparation in subjects that I was good at. So there were many ways in which I figured out what am I passionate about. Um, then I started to think of what is really my proficiency, what is my core proficiency. And I went back to some of the periods in college, for example. I used to do declamation, I used to do theater, which means that I was good at communication. I had no stage fright. So I discovered that about myself. I also realized that about 6, 7 years into my profession, when I was asked to make a presentation in front of about 150 people, including the vice president of the company of my division, um, after the presentation, a lot of people came to me and said, how many weeks did you take to prepare for this presentation? And believe you me, it actually wasn't weeks, it was hours. What I found was that whenever I actually prepared for a presentation, it came in my way. So I was best in being spontaneous about it. Even right now, as I'm speaking to you, I'm not referring to any notes, to be honest. I'm not even prepared. I'm just saying what is coming to me at this moment in time, because I think that is what needs to emerge. So I discovered some of these things. I also discovered in one or two of my work assignments that I can build teams. And later on, this whole thought process went from building teams to building communities. I became very good at building communities. Now it is probably more social media, but prior to that, it was actually physical communities. So, armed with this kind of a knowledge of what is it that I was passionate about and what is it that I was good at, uh, I really started to think about what is it that will best suit my work in which I can combine both these things. One of the things I also realized was that it is possible for you to be good at something, but not necessarily be passionate about it. One of the examples in my life was the whole world of business processes. For about 9 years, I worked in a consulting company where I worked on business processes. And I was very good at it. And later on, some clients of mine would actually call me for doing that work. But I was not charged about it at all. So it's very important to understand that being good at something is not a license to be passionate about it. You have to discover both and you have to really align both. So over a period of time, I realized that I was very charged up about people, what drives people, what moves people, what inspires people. So in a very interesting way, I combined these two to start looking at people processes, not necessarily operational and business processes. And that is how the alignment found me, and I found the alignment. So I guess the core thing that I'm trying to say here is the term that I gave to this is called resonance. Resonance stands for transformational resonance. And this transformational resonance, if I may just, I just put a slide, so let me just use that. For me, this transformational resonance is an alignment of three things. It's an alignment of your thrill, which means what you're passionate about, your skill, which means what is it that you're really good at, not just good at, but spontaneously, effortlessly good at. And this is not about being egoistic about it, but somewhere that you are good at this. And the last thing is, once you have figured these out, you then look for a drill, which means the choice of a profession or a vocation in which you can align both of these. And once you do that, I believe what then comes out and emerges for you is really the divine will or the purpose of your life. So this is perhaps my way of thinking. I have not just seen it for myself, but I also tested the waters for a few people. So when I turned 50, I left my very decently paying job in a multinational called Airtel, and I joined a startup company called Prerna Center of Learning, essentially to live my resonance. And the vision of that organization was to develop consciousness centered leadership that will transform society. Because I became a lot more concerned about not just my own benefit, but about a benefit of the wider world. Now, those of you who may have heard about Ikigai would have heard about four things that it talks about balancing, which is what you're good at, what you're passionate about, what pays the bills, and what's good for the world. I think my learning was that what's good for the world is more coming out of the development, your own inner development, your own connectivity with your soul. This may or may not happen for everybody in the beginning. And therefore, it's quite okay for us to not over worry about it in the beginning. However, the kind of satisfaction and fulfillment that you get when you're actually engaging in something which is good for the wider world just cannot be substituted by your ability or the amount of money that you're earning. So this was certainly for me a big insight that as you evolve, you will start to automatically look at meaning and not necessarily money. Money may keep coming and you have to be thankful for it. So this is, as far as resonance is concerned, that is really the thinking that I have. And there is also a process. I started guiding people, for example, in the process. And I'll just share the process here with you. What was the process that I encouraged everyone to follow? This wasn't the process that I followed, but I realized over a period of time trying to help many people that this process will perhaps work well. So the first step in this process is to identify people who have been close to you in your life, both at a personal level as well as at a professional level. So just like a 360 degree, which many of us are used to in a leadership context, this is also like a 360 degree. So identify such people from different walks of life, both work and personal life. And I typically encourage, talk to your parents, talk to your very good friends, talk to your siblings, talk to your bosses, talk to your peers, talk to your team members. Enough number of people with a certain amount of diversity who have seen you in action. Ask them two questions. the first question to ask them is, what is it that you have really seen me passionate about? Okay. When you have seen that when I'm indulging in it, time stands still for me. I probably may not even worry about eating, etc. That's the question. What am I passionate about? The second question to ask is, what is it that I am really good at? Naturally, spontaneously, and effortlessly good at. Seek examples from them, saying, give me an incident based on which you say this, so that it becomes clear to you that what they are sharing with you is not just something which is coming from top of the mind or something to please you, but it is backed up with evidence. And even when you're trying to deal with the whole subject of passion or proficiency, go deeper. You know, the Japanese have something called 5 why analysis, which means you keep asking why. So if somebody says that, oh, I love playing football, okay, very good. But then you ask the next question saying, what is it about football that you love playing? What aspect of it? Then somebody might come and say that, oh, it's a team game and I love playing team games. So then you begin to get a slightly different flavor of what that passion is. So keep digging till you're able to get to that set of answers. Once you've got these answers from people, and you obviously have your own reflection based on the way you have lived your life, consolidate and reflect this on this information. Consolidate this information and reflect on it. And my own understanding is that you get to a stage, maybe it is 70%, maybe it is 80%, but you begin to get a deeper understanding of your nature. In Hindi, we use a term swabhav, that what is my nature, and my nature as represented by what am I passionate about and what am I really good at. Now, once you have that in place somewhat, and you don't have to reach a sense of perfection there, but at least you got a sense of it, then you start thinking of drill options, saying, what kind of things will this actually work in? Which means, what are those options of work where these two can come together? So brainstorm those drill options. I mean, when I was going through my own journey, and I realized in hindsight that my drill options were very varied. I applied to be the CEO of a hospital, among other things. Just before I became the CEO of this company, Prerna Center of Learning, which I spoke about. So drill options can actually be many. And from these drill options, now this is the time you bring up your current context and if you have any limitations. Some people, for example, have mobility limitation. Some people don't have money as a limitation, but they have other limitations. They're looking after parents. Something or the other in their current context is important. So once you have a set of drill options, you now apply the current context and work out what I would say are the viable options of drill. And once you have figured out the viable options of drill, then I guess you have to find ways to connect with the options. I set up a not-for-profit body called Resonance Foundation, and I think some of the people who worked with me at that time uh, in helping people to figure that resonance out are present here. And the way to work this was that we would then leverage our network to be able to start helping such people to even connect with their so-called drill options. So I made my network open. I contacted many people in the industry. I remember at one stage a guy came to me whose mother was very interested that he should continue to pursue IT. But he used to be interested in music. He used to be interested in photography. So from my network, I helped him connect to one of the well-known photographers of India. And to cut a long story short, today this guy is a very successful professional photographer who lives in Sweden. It took him some amount of time to figure out and to even develop the interest to a point where he could say that this is what my life is going to be. I remember another case where a lady came to me. She was, I think, about 28, 29 years old, and she had become a recent mother, and she used to be a sales trainer. So her question was, what is it that I can do? So we spoke about things. We spoke about what is it that she was good at. I found her to be very soft spoken. She could connect with you beautifully. And one of the things I shared with her as a possibility was, I said, can you look at some kind of energy work? Because you seem to have some presence. Now, she actually went and looked at something called clinical hypnotherapy. She got certified in it and became a clinical hypnotherapist. And then subsequently, she combined her past experience of actually training to put it together along with this and became a trainer in the whole space of mindfulness. And today, as we speak, she's not only a hypnotherapist, but she is also teaching mindfulness to college students. So I find that once you start on this journey, you will find things. And the other thing which I've learned is that not everybody is necessarily fortunate. Sometimes we get caught in the trap of EMIs. We have not really found this trajectory, and it may take us a certain amount of time to be able to take that leap of faith. We may never take that leap of faith till we are much older. And I believe that you're never too old. Sometimes, later on, I talk to people today in their 50s and 60s. For them, money is no longer important. For them, meaning is important. So the whole, working for a job to pay the bills is out of the equation now. So the question still remains that in such a situation, what will help you to decide? And it's not just about saying that, oh, I want to find meaning. I believe that you will really find meaningful meaning if you have first examined yourself more deeply, figured out your passion and your proficiency, which is what I call your swabhav, and then put this swabhav to work in what is called your swadharma, which is what is it that you are really here for. So I guess if I have to give a key message on what is the process, what is resonance, this is really what it is. And sometime in 2013 14, I came across a very interesting framework, which is called the Barrett's framework. So I started using the Barrett's framework to keep redefining some of these aspects for me from time to time. So every 2 to 3 years, I prepare a document for myself, which answers a few questions. And I'm now going to share that framework with you. It's a framework which was given to us by Barrett Value Center. So that is, it's important to know that. And I was certified in Barrett Value Center. So I could actually use this for myself and for others. So what this framework actually talks about your soul and your head, which means your doing and your being components. It first starts by asking you to define what is your core motivation. Which means what is it that really brings me to work? Work doesn't necessarily mean working for somebody, for my own self. What is it that really gives me passion? Now, what I have written here is my updated core purpose and its elements as on date, October 2023. This is probably the fifth or the sixth iteration in the statement. So, holistically evolving as a human being personally is currently probably the most important to me. The other things are there, but they are relatively secondary. So, I spread knowledge and insights and create spaces to enable such deeper connections. So, for example, this conversation that I am having with you is to create such a space of reflection. And I'm in intimate conversations and storytelling sessions about life and living, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. So, this is my current core motivation. Then, my contribution to my clients or employer, as the case may be, depending upon the context to which I belong. Number one, I support people in their personal evolution. And by helping them answer these kind of questions, by helping them navigate and bring clarity in their life. And the second, at the level of organizations, I help build enduring institutions. I realize that my focus in the last few years is more and more the first and less the second. Because I do have a sense of despondency with respect to institutions and organizations. Maybe I have become somewhat cynical. So I do less work with them. But if for the last 2 years, I've been working with an NGO, and I think that gives me a lot of satisfaction in helping them to be endearing and enduring. Then the third is, what is my contribution to the wider world? By the way, these headers are all part of the framework of Barrett Value Center. So what is my contribution to the wider world? I build and nurture communities that inspirationally spread health and happiness on this planet. Now, I realize that over the last few years, it's probably more social media led communities. So I tend to spread knowledge a lot using social media whenever I have an opportunity for community. So, for example, Kevin has this community, and I am collaborating with him to be able to spread the word about something which I believe could be useful to everybody. But health and happiness on this planet is somewhere important. My wife and I set up something called a Health and Happiness Center 6 years ago. We have a house in a place which is in Gurgaon near Delhi, and we have a house there, and we live in Delhi. So we converted it into a happiness and healing center where we invite facilitators who work in the alternate energy space, for example. And on the other side, we have people who are interested in uh, taking this kind of an information and becoming, more healed and more happy. And the last box is about what gives me personal fulfillment. So I believe that when I enable people to do this discovery for themselves and also help others to develop the skill to do so, so that there can be a wider impact. So let's say if there are 80, 90 of you here, one is that if you deeply understand what I'm sharing with you, you actually apply it to your life. And then based on that application, you're able to, let's say, bring this same approach to another 10 people, another 50 people. Just imagine the exponential impact. So that is something which gives me a sense of deeper fulfillment. I'm not into a numbers game, to be honest. People ask me saying, okay, how many people have you converted? That's really not my game. My game is to be able to touch deeply people. Even if I have touched one person deeply, I believe that I have a sense of fulfillment about it. And at a very personal level, I have a vision of being the best father in the world. My daughter may not ever say so, but I think I do things to be a best father and a supportive husband. So this is something that I figured out later on, and this framework helps me to keep thinking and rethinking my sense of purpose. And my core purpose, which I have defined, um, I don't know. I think I've stopped sharing. One second. Let me just do that for a minute. So my core purpose is given right at the end, which combines all these things together, which is actually to enable individuals and organizations to discover and manifest their deeper calling and higher purpose. So when I work with organizations, I ask them a simple question. Do you want to be the best in the world, or do you want to be the best for the world? And it's okay to be best in the world only if your intention is to be the best for the world. Otherwise, it's an ego trip, it's not a soul trip. And both these things that I do is to help build a happier and healthier planet, not just for current generation, but also future generations. And I try to contribute to it in whichever way I can. So that's the core purpose, evolved from looking at all of these elements. And as I said, this is renewed periodically, maybe once every 2 to 3 years. So I think with that, I'm going to end my very long monologue and perhaps invite Kevin, because he wanted to ask some questions and then involve the audience to handle their questions as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really appreciate it. How wonderful that was, and the frameworks and approaches are very practical. And I think you've awakened me to some new learnings along the way. And thank you so much. I've got a few comments and questions for you, and then we'll open it up to the broader audience for questions for the last half hour. And please, prepare whatever you want to ask Vinit. after the event on the Hope LeaderJam site, there's a chat where you can keep in touch with him over time, and we want that ongoing conversation to build. You can get in touch with him. A big part of this work is to keep us all together beyond today. So one thing that I'm asked a lot is, you know, by folks on this journey is, what's the difference between the practical nature of life, the mundane stuff, and the higher calling vision? You called it divine will. And it's a real challenge because I think people, look at the world and they get sucked into, paying the rent and the concerns of the world and the concerns of their relationships, and then on a business side, as you articulated, the the practical stuff that needs to get done to run a business versus the higher calling nature of what a business is. And it reminds me of a story of Steve Jobs, who's such a fantastic exemplar. And I was in India speaking to an audience of a few thousand young people, and I talked about Steve Jobs. I featured him in a book I wrote, and everyone thought I knew Steve Jobs, and all the young people followed me around for about 2 days after that. But my favorite story of Steve Jobs was when he was let go from Apple, and they asked him after he came back to Apple what he had learned about himself and about the world, and he said, "I learned that inventory management matters." What an odd thing to say. I mean, it feels like a very focused thing to say. But like all gurus and wise men, what he was saying was, I'm a vision guy. I'm a big picture guy. I naturally move to, the impact on humanity. I have this vision that carries people all over the world. And some people have said the iPad have saved more trees than any nonprofit that's worked on the environment. Think about his global impact. So what he was saying, I think, is I got good at the stuff that got us in trouble before. So inventory management must have been an issue in the period when he was in trouble at Apple. And if you've ever run a restaurant or you've ever run a retailer, what have you, inventory management is everything. But it's not everything when you're thinking of the big picture of how the retailer is going to impact, and you're up here. So one thing I would recommend to the audience and the folks collaborating on this call is to give yourself a headache. Allow yourself to modulate from the place you're comfortable to the place you're not comfortable. If you're comfortable and passionate about operations and systems, you're a guru. You've got your own guruhood in that component. And some may find that stuff more mundane. Allow yourself to move into the big picture. And if you're a big picture woman and you have these visions, and allow yourself to spend time with the engineers and the inventory management people and the operations component, and find the calling in that. Not that you have to naturally be in it, but you can appreciate it and be part of it, so that you combine the hourglass component of the world, which is the foundational and the higher components. So one concept. Another concept that I want to share with you is around money, and people all over the world every day struggle with issues of money. It's a core component, and businesses or schools or NGOs, what have you, run on money. America runs on Duncan, and your business runs on money, and it's the lifeblood. So a week ago, I do a lot of automatic writing, and I got a beautiful statement in my automatic writing from the divine presence that I'm going to say it twice if anyone wants to write it down. So, money is God. That was the first statement. And the second statement is money is love. And the third statement I received is money is balance. So money is God, money is love, money is balance. And as I've read it a few times over the last week, I thought, what a great statement. What a wonderful thing to say, because what that statement does is it neutralizes money, right? It means that money is a gift from God. Money is an expression of your love. Where do you spend your love? Where do you spend your money? Where do you spend your business? One of the great Harvard gurus, Harrison, I think, at the Harvard Business School, on social impact, they asked her, how do you qualify a business that does social impact versus one that doesn't? And she said, ask them where they spend their money. So she said, her title of her work, if you want to look into Harrison further, is Reinventing the Corporation. So she said, it's all about, are they spending money on social impact? They can talk about it, they can read about it, they can study about it, but are they getting their hands dirty and taking the scarce resource and moving it into love or not? If they're not about social impact. Don't kid yourself. So money is love is a beautiful kind of fulcrum, because it puts you right in the heart of whether you're activating or not. And the third, money is balance, is all the way back to Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin said, if you have $10,000 and you spend 9,000, you're wealthy, and if you have $10,000 and you spend 12,000, you're poor. So money is balance. It's this. You talked about the balance scorecard, and I know some people on this call are fans of the balance scorecard, and the balance scorecard is about balance, right? So money is God, money is love, money is balance. Neutralize the top and the bottom. Try to bring them together in a way they stop fighting with each other, because they naturally fight with each other. The world of practical systems fights with the vision, and the world of vision fights with the bottom, until you start realizing they're one and the same, and they can move together when you find the magic that balances them. You might have been uncomfortable when I said money is God. People might have been like, whoa, that's not how I go to church. That's not how I go to temple. But it is. Prosperity is divine. Givingness is divine. A friend of mine on an ashram, and then I'll ask Bennett some questions, sat across from me over breakfast. And he passed away not long after, maybe 5 or 7 years later, younger guy, brilliant guy, real great friend. And he looked at me and he said, everything is a gift. Everything. And he emphasized everything, and I'm eating my cereal and eating a banana thinking, why are you telling me this? And he said, that banana started in the earth. The earth is God. And then it was cultivated with the hands of men and women. And it was picked by men and women. And then it was put on a truck driven by men and women. And the petrol came from some guy in Texas or Saudi who had to process all of that. And then all the people along the way who fed the guy in the truck are a gift. And the highway and the concrete and and he took it all the way into the room where we were eating. Everything along the path of delivery and value is a gift. Everything. The people running the restaurant who are serving the bananas sometimes think they're the banana people, but they don't think about the gifts all the way along the way. All the way along the way. And a lot of those feel like mundane things, but they're beautiful and valuable and critical to one guy in a small ashram eating a banana. Everything's a gift. The last thing I'll say, again, quoting Ben Franklin, and I would strongly recommend you watch the Ken Burns documentary that came out, I think, last year on Ben Franklin. And it's one of my favorite quotes about social entrepreneurship, because there's a lot of fallacy in the thinking about business and social entrepreneurship. Again, Reed Harrison. Ben Franklin said, the greatest social impact is a product that helps people. The greatest social impact is a product that helps people. And I'm paraphrasing, he said it a little differently. But the point is, the iPad helped people by preserving trees that give us breath and life. Business people, social impact people, nonprofit people, passion people, divine will people get too caught up in the constructs, way too caught up, right? Meaning, are we making money here? Are we giving the money away? Are we doing a nonprofit? Are we running a for-profit? Are we doing a B Corp? You know, all of that is kind of noise. You know, Franklin, who invented a lot of amazing products, I mean, discovered electricity with the kite and developed the concept of a library. And he didn't care if a utility was selling electricity or if books were being gifted to people. He didn't care about the mechanics. He cared about the gift. What impact does it have on people of what you're doing? And if you're a doctor who invents, you know, medicine that creates a big pharma part of the industry and a $20 billion value, the question isn't the money, it's what did you do to create the thing that heals people? And then what is your responsibility after you have the money? Right? It has nothing to do with the business mechanics. It has to do with who you are. And that's what you talked about, Bennett. You said, when you connect to the divine will, the rest of it is detail, right? The rest of it lines up. And we all have a wife or a daughter and our local system that we support with balance, love, and God and money. We all have a broader community that we all support with balance, love, and money, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you so much for setting the table and creating frameworks that I hope, so to speak, we all work on after this session. And the other part of the Hope platform is you can sign up for Vinit to coach. You can sign up for Vinit to do master classes later with you, your teams. We also have other speakers coming up who I'm going to talk about at the end of the session. So Vinit, when you work with people, I'm going to put you on the spot. You talked a little bit about this, but what are the other hardest issues that they have? What kind of showstoppers or headaches or ways they get stuck? What would you think about as the toughest problems for people around this notion of having impact?
So if I understand your question to be right, you're saying that in this journey of discovering and manifesting your own calling, what are the kind of challenges that people might be facing that I have encountered in my working
There
with them?
you go. Exactly.
Perfect. So I think again, what is the hardest or what is not the hardest? But the key thing that I find is that the current context um, tends to create a limitation for people, which means that whatever it is that I'm doing today, I am extremely risk averse because of where I am. Either the money that I'm earning is so important that even though I'm not enjoying doing that job, I still feel that I have to keep on doing it, for example, for whatever
Mhm.
reasons, personal and other reasons. Um, and I guess to such people, I have a lot of empathy for people like that. I don't want to be idealistic and say
Mhm.
that, oh, leave everything and go on this journey of discovering your calling immediately.
Mhm.
I realized that I worked for 11 years before I got a kind of a divine slap in the term form of a heart attack, which put me out for a month and then made me reflect. I think
Mm.
my only request is, let us not have situations like this give us a kick. Uh, we need to find our personal space and time to first be able to consider. Secondly, till such time as you can find and do what you really love, remember that every experience, and I think this is exactly what you said about Steve Jobs, every experience is actually meant to prepare you. So,
Mhm.
can you at least love what you do and make enough peace with it rather than continuously cribbing about it? Because it's our attitude of cribbing which actually creates low energy. So, at the end of the day, you can find something nice in the most mundane of things that you may be doing.
What do you mean
Uh,
by cribbing? What does that mean?
complaining.
Complaining.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
So I think this is one thing that I should say. The other thing which I find is that, at least in today's world, because I deal with a lot of young children as well, there is a lot of this anxiety, a sense of panic, sense of despondency, which seems to be actually creating a block in people to
Mhm.
be able to even go beyond and even start thinking on something like this. And
Mhm.
I guess I don't profess to be a certified psychologist or a counselor. And my suggestion is, in such a situation, perhaps take the help of someone who's professionally qualified to be able to at least remove those bottlenecks for you. And either after that or in parallel, this conversation of discovery and manifestation continues. So
Mhm.
I think these are the two specific things, if I might say. In an organizational context, you were giving an example, and I was thinking, see, in the organization there are two problems that we face right now.
Mhm.
One problem that we face is, for example, most organizations have something called a behavioral competency framework. So they have created a framework of what are 5 or 6 things that leaders must demonstrate as a behavior. And the development plans of such leaders is set on the basis of where your gaps are, where you need to improve. What I believe is that in an organization, if you really want to take this calling principle, I would say, can you help people to stay with their strength areas and create teams intelligently so that between them they complement these strengths, rather than every time expose their weaknesses and make them work on those weaknesses, or for those weaknesses to come in their way. I'll give a classic example. I worked in Airtel for 4 years. Now, in Airtel, the founder was a gentleman by the name of Sunil Bharti Mittal. He had a deputy whose name was Akhil Gupta. Sunil's strength lay in being a visionary and in being a relationship person. He managed to get companies like Singtel to invest in Airtel even when Airtel was a nobody.
Mhm.
That was his skill. Akhil Gupta, on the other hand, his essential competency was in strategy. He's the guy who was the past master in the outsourcing deal, because of which Airtel actually became the fifth largest mobile service provider in the world in no time at all. We
Mhm.
outsourced network, we outsourced customer service, we outsourced IT, and we linked all of these outsourcing to a revenue sharing principle. So, in one stroke, the fixed cost got converted to variable cost, and growth could happen a lot more easy. Now, imagine if I try to tell an Akhil Gupta to become a visionary and a relationship man, and if I try to tell Sunil Mittal to become a process man, I'll be
Mhm.
dead.
Right.
So I think in the just keeping in this principle and integrity with the calling principle, I would say find people's strength
Right.
and put them together to work to make a much larger impact.
Great. And another way to say what you said, right, is something that a friend of mine told me some time ago. And it's a simple model of a reflection of what you said, is a visionary CEO has to have a good COO. Has to. The sickness in many organizations is the visionary doesn't have the countervailing talent, right? And the COO who's very good at what they do has to have someone with vision and the outer components. That's the formula. And the formula is representative of a lot of detail. I mean, that's not the end of it, right? Um, so let's go to the other side. We talked about, places where people struggle and you know, how am I going to pay the rent if I leave this job? And Gandhi lived in poverty. There's a famous saying that it cost India a fortune to keep Gandhi in poverty as the leader of the nation. But he gave up worldly things, and so what is it about that conversation that can be successful if you move into social impact and their costs and their relationship costs, and you got to talk to your partner about what you're doing now and that works. How does that work? Let's not talk about how it doesn't work, because we can all imagine how it doesn't work, but where have you seen that work and what happens when it works?
So again, I take your question to be that to mean that when I'm working with people and helping them along in this journey, um, what is it that I have seen work more often than not?
Yeah, yes, right.
Yeah.
When
So
it
I
works.
think, yeah. So I think the first thing that I find is that uh, to help them be okay with where they are seems to be an important condition. The moment the idealism comes in, and there is always the thing about doing something to improve, then you're constantly beating yourself. So again, something that I heard very interesting is that this earth is 13.8 billion years old, and it has brought you to this point where you stand today, right now that we are talking. How can you be anything but perfect if that's the amount of time it took the universe to come to this point,
Right.
right?
No pressure, right?
Yeah. So first thing is, let's celebrate perfection. Let us
Hmm.
celebrate the goodness of what we have. Let us touch into the feeling of gratitude for what we already possess, and then look for joyfully the opportunities that can present themselves. So
Hmm.
I feel that empathy and getting them connected with their personal sense of current situation and the gratitude with it is a very important precondition in my view.
Hmm.
The other
So
thing, yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. The other thing that I find is that, see, people may intellectually understand, what I'm passionate about, what is it that I'm really good at. But I think when the rubber hits the road, you have to be patient about the drill options. You might
Hmm.
get into a drill option and you may find that it doesn't work. But you have to keep, I mean, this is a dynamic. Resonance to me is a very dynamic formula.
Right.
You may discover other nuances of it, and you need to therefore have that resilience and patience to not just drop apart in saying, oh, my first attempt didn't work.
Yeah,
So I
right,
think
right.
these are the two critical things I would say.
Yeah, it's great. My mother gave me a book early on called something like Diamonds in Your Backyard, and it's a famous, famous, famous foundational book. And the lesson is, it's right there. You think you're on this journey of discovery, but you're really a great singer and sing, right? So the the reason that people get off track is they don't value themselves. They don't value their lives. They don't think they're good enough. They have a vision of a book. It's a vision. I don't like it, or it's great, but I can't do that. There's a self-worth element to this that you've got to learn to know yourself and appreciate it and bring it, right? Or you cannot do this work.
True.
And Len Schlesinger, who's a good friend, former president of Babson, does work on alumni teaching, and he did an event a year ago, which was an alumni event, and it was on happiness. And they said, "What's the core to happiness?" And he said, "Friends and relationships." But then they said, "How about when it relates to your work?" And he said, the research is impenetrable. Focus on your strengths. Develop your strengths, bring your strengths, up your strengths, go back to your strengths. Then you may be strong in 15 places. For any empty nesters on the call,
Yeah.
when those kids leave the house, you realize, oh my gosh, I was a decent violin player. Let me keep playing or start playing again. Beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to stop talking and pause myself and open Vinit up to some questions. Before we left, there was the sense that calling is a need. It's a requirement from Joe. You can't help yourself, right? You talked about that, making what drives you. You said you're born with a seed, and it's gonna blossom with or without you, hopefully with you. And then Ravi said that calling is something for the betterment of society. I think that's right. I think whenever you're ideating on the bus to work, on the good of the people on the bus, you're on it. Just do that. Betterment of society, betterment of family, betterment of team, betterment of the world. When you don't have to call it religion, you don't have to call it meditation, you don't have to call it anything. Just ideate on the betterment of the whole, and you're there. Abe Lincoln said, kindness is religion.
My
So
only
let's open.
disclaimer to that, Kevin,
Yeah,
to that is I don't want people to overthink this whole good for the society bit.
right.
The problem is that we live in a world full of should feelings, and
Yeah,
sometimes it actually comes in the way of naturally flowing and flowering. So
love
if
that.
if
Right.
something hasn't really touched your soul at that deeper level to want to be of service to the society, it's okay. Be of service to yourself, because then in that process you will learn to be of service at least.
Love it. That's a really important block. I mean, if you look out and say, look, I'm going to end war, you're going to be really unhappy. I'm going to end such and such. It's an equation for misery because you're not going to end it. But you said in your conversation 4 times satisfaction. So it's really a personal satisfaction as it connects and integrates with the whole. And in some ways, it's Ben Franklin wanting to have a kite up in the air that made it all happen. It was love for the kite, right? And that moment that he had. So let's open it up to chat questions. We have a nice audience with some fantastic questions so far. And what would you like to ask Vinit? Or I'm struggling a little bit to pull this slider down. If people just want to jump in and ask a question, unmute, ask your question, and then mute again after your question. Yes, sir. Santosh.
Hi, this is Santosh. So, Vineet, I think what you said was very amazing. However, I came to this realization at the age of 64. So how do you encourage? I think that this message needs to get to the people at a younger age, maybe at the school level, college level, so they're not driven just by getting a job that offers them a lot of money, but more than money, something maybe a balance between money and your passion or for social cause. Or like you said, you need one job for that pays the bill and the other job, that you can pursue. So this message needs to be spread at a younger level to a lot of younger people, because I think most of the current generation, at least my kids and many of them I know, they're not thinking along these lines. They're very much materialistic, and most of us realize more towards the end of our life or maybe after we retire. So what do you think about that?
Great question.
Yeah, thanks, Santosh. I think first of all, you're absolutely right. In fact, one of the things I'm doing, I have been taking these sessions at the college level. In fact, just 2 months ago, I was with about 100 students, 120 students of a college. My alma mater, IIT Delhi, I have taken a one-day workshop and a couple of other sessions with them. And I completely agree with you that the earlier we can get people introduced to this concept, the better off we are. And I'm extremely hopeful that the 30 odd participants present here take that message not just for themselves, but for perhaps doing it themselves, or allowing me or introducing me to such places where I can go and speak to them. I'm very happy to do that. For me, that's
Great.
a very deep sense of fulfillment.
Yeah, getting started early. The earlier the better. And
Yeah.
Hope's working with kids in high school. Go ahead, Shantosh. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was wondering, so Vineet, what was the response when you spoke at the college or school level?
Well, out of the 120 people, I now have about 50 people who are my LinkedIn friends, and they
Great.
keep asking me questions in the back end, and they were very taken up, and some of them actually said that my eyes have really opened today. Now that might be one odd person, but I think it impacts different people different ways. Just the
Mhm.
ability to think that what is the basis on which you will take the decisions on what job to work. Is it salary? Is it brand? Is it location? Or is it your passion and your proficiency? I think just that in itself makes a big deal difference.
Yeah, and Santosh, you look 40, so you're getting started just at the right time. And I'm reminded
No, I'm
that
not 40. I'm 60, 65.
I said, yeah, but
That
you
was
look
wrong.
40.
Yeah.
You look 40, so you're getting at just
Well,
the
so
right
do
time.
you, and so does
Thank
Vineet.
you.
Yeah. By
Yeah,
the way,
we're in the same
yeah.
age.
By the way, I do spread this message. I've given a number of informal sessions. I'm not a professional, but I enjoy talking, and I do talk to a lot of younger people. And I also, something I mentioned that, okay, we all generally talk about IQ. Everyone thinks about IQ, right? Getting in the top college. All right. Now we all know about emotional quotient too, right? Social quotient, about how sociable you are, people oriented. That's also important. And the last one that I have learned over the last 3 years is adversity quotient. How do you deal with adversity? And that's also important, a lesson that younger people need to know, because you may not succeed in every venture that you do. There will be ups and downs in your life, and we should be able to withstand or weather the storm.
Yeah, and on that note, Dr. Phil said, and if anyone is feeling old on this call, and I've met 30-year-olds who feel old. I've met 40-year-olds who feel old, certainly 80-year-olds who feel old. But Dr. Phil said, if you're in your 70s and you're bored, you better get with it, because with the new medicine, you may live to 120. So if you're in your 70s, you may have another 50 years of boredom. So get with it is the answer. So Chandra asked a great question. Better that you jump on the video and ask Vinit live than me try to translate the chat. Do you want to ask him what you want to ask him?
Okay. Says they're having a video audio issue.
Yeah, no worries. Does anyone else have a question? Chandra, you can come back in. Oh,
Yeah,
she said,
I have,
go ahead. Danny,
I have,
you go, and then
yeah,
I'll read
yeah,
Chandra's
I have a
question.
question. This is just very general. This has been extremely helpful, especially this concept of a 360 in terms of asking people that you know around you, giving you feedback, and that's really to me brilliant. But I just want to thank you, and also this is sort of just off the top of my head, but the two things that really stand out for me in this conversation personally is this whole issue of getting out of your comfort zone and being aware of your reflecting on things that, like the contradiction between fear and the risk of taking action as opposed to faith and a belief in yourself and others, and that things will pan out. And that's the first point. And then the second point is just what I'm experiencing is just the importance of just simply taking incremental steps and reflecting on them as you go through a journey. For example, I'm going to Africa next month and to Ghana, and I've never been to Africa, but I'm part of this NGO. But there's a lot of fear. I mean, generally, there's a lot of friends of mine that are in a space of depression, profound depression, anger, over the Middle East, what's going on in the Middle East, Ukraine, climate catastrophes, unpredictable climate shocks, but it can paralyze you. It can paralyze you. And there's this sense of fear, like, should I go to Africa, or I'm afraid of going there because of security risks. And so I'd just like you to comment on that particularly that whole contradiction between living in, what space are you living in, as you take this journey in terms of your own stories, growing up, say, about money, about scarcity as opposed to abundance, or the space of anger and depression and fear, in terms of getting out of your comfort zone. Could you just comment on that? How do those issues block your journey to find a calling?
So what I'm going to say may or may not directly answer your question, but if it gives you a perspective, then it would be nice.
Yeah.
What I find works for me, number one, is giving myself permission to not do things at times, and simply giving myself the time and the space to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Not getting bogged down by what my family might be saying, what somebody else might be saying, hey, you're wasting your time, etc. Because I believe that if something has to manifest, then time and space is very important. And at one level, we are timeless and spaceless. So I'm not worried about when that comes to me. The second thing I realize is, at least this is the way I have operated, I find that my stress or fear is directly proportional to the gap between my circle of concern and my circle of influence. The more my circle of concern and the less my circle of influence, I just get unnecessarily stressed and I find a lot of risks, etc. So I do two things. One is I actually engage very little with any kind of media. I've stopped watching all television and reading all newsprint for the last 4 years, 5 years, more than that maybe. You may call me foolish and therefore, somebody who doesn't bother about the world, but that's my way of dealing with it. I look at the situations which are close to me, which are near me, and what difference can I make to them. So if there are strays in my colony, and if I can make a difference to those strays, I will go and make a difference to those strays. That is where I match my circle of influence with my circle of concern. When I do that, I am very much at ease with myself. So at least that's my approach, if I might say.
Well, really powerful, and
Yeah.
something everyone can implement that today. Reduce the noise and find quiet. The other thing I would say to you on the anxiety part, somebody told me this during COVID and I loved it. She said, don't worry about the next strain of COVID. Do worry about getting a vaccination. Basically says there's stuff you cannot worry about. That stuff you can do. Okay, worry about that. Next question is Chandra, and it actually, Danny, pivots off yours, so maybe you can talk about Chandra's question too. So she asked about the 360. You know, you're supposed to discover yourself. Why would you go talk to 10 or 15 people about yourself? But you said you like that idea. So what, then how do you respond to that?
No, I think that's a great question. For example, in my discovery, I didn't really talk to 10 or 15 people. I didn't. I believe that, as they say, for example, one of my managers told me that while decision making is a very rational process, decision taking is a very emotional process. So I believe that in the end, what you know, only you know. And if you don't really want to go through the 360, and if you only want to stay with what is coming from within you at a deeper level and it's bubbling up, that's great. All I find is that many people look for validation. Unfortunately, that's the way we are built. We seek validation and we look for validation. The other thing is that sometimes we have blind spots, Johari windows, right? So these conversations help us to be able to at least unpack those. If at all we haven't seen something in ourselves, low self-esteem means I often think I'm bad in everything. So I don't even go around looking at the good in me. So some conversations like this can open the doors for you to be able to think differently.
Yeah, and I think psychologists say that, group therapy is one of the most powerful things. And I'm always surprised, we have about 30 people on this, how powerful it is to be together in the problem. How powerful it is, and your mom and dad teach you, be independent, get it done yourself. That's all great. That's all great. You got to be independent. You got to do it yourself, but be in community, go to church, come to Hope, be together, because it's so powerful. Who else wants to jump in on a question? We have a few minutes left, maybe two more questions, and then I'm going to wrap up with some ideas for you. And all the people who had to leave early, thank you for coming. We appreciate it a lot. Who has another question for Vinit? Ask the tough stuff, the things that really bother you. What are you embarrassed about? What's hard?
Maybe I'll tell you what's hard, Kevin. One thing which is very hard is don't try and teach resonance to your kids directly.
Don't try to what? Don't try to what?
Don't try and teach this principle of resonance to your kids directly. Get somebody else to do it instead of you.
Right. If we wanted to teach our son a lesson, we had his doctor tell him, right? We didn't tell him.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. What else do people have to ask? Anybody with a success story, anything you want to ask, talk about. So if not, I'm gonna jump in here. Just a few last stories and a little bit about what's coming up on Hope's agenda soon. There's a beautiful prayer that my guru gave me and many, many people. And I so honor it because I think it's so powerful. He said, love the whole world, love the whole world. And if you can't love the whole world, love your country, love your country. If you can't love your country, love your state. If you can't love your state, love your town. If you can't love your town, love your family. But for goodness sake,
Kevin, you've frozen, yeah. Can't hear you, Kevin.
The most powerful work, in my view, on social networks. And Nick's research says if you're friendly to the postman when he comes to your house, it has 3 layers of impact. Think about that. So you can go in and do cribbing. I learned a new word today. You can crib at the post office and be bitter and testy and nasty. That has 3 levels of effect. Or you can walk up to the lady behind the counter and say, "It's so nice to see you. How's it going today?" She then treats her husband better. He then treats the dog better. The dog treats the cat better. It's a literal powerful effect. So if you want to have a calling and change the world today, be kind and decent to people. And don't be insincere. Talk to the cab driver because the guy's got wisdom. Conversation is the great leveler. So one idea, I'll give you one more meditation, then I'm going to talk about what we have upcoming. A friend gave me this some years ago. I really love it because it has an internal external connection that you can do every day. It came to him in a vision, like the money is God thing came to me. And it was, when you expand love in yourself, you expand me. When you expand joy in yourself, you expand me. When you expand peace in yourself, you expand me. So the divine principle is yours. It's yours. You own it. Learn how to expand those things every day. So it's love, it's joy, it's peace. Know how to expand those things and learn how to expand those things. I was thinking about the economics of devotion, because the economics of devotion is a great topic that we need to do here in the future at some point. Let me first, alongside all of the amazing comments, thank Vinit for a fantastic presentation. We're volunteers at Hope. We all do work for free all the time. That's the economics of devotion. And it matters. There's something about giving without money involved that's really, really powerful. If you want to support Hope, do 2 things. One is go onto the platform and bring Vinit through the platform into your organizations, into your work. And there's an economic function, and we make some money, and we continue. Also, join us in the future for our future efforts. We're doing Awakening Your Creative Power with Youth, Karen Light, on November 30th. It's a Thursday at 10 a.m. We do these all at the same time, 10 a.m. Karen is a doodling expert. She has a doodling practice, and she teaches how to doodle. And I'm not a very good drawer, so I did her thing, and it really opened me up to the notion of doodling and finding yourself, finding ideas, finding concepts through that process. And Karen is a really special lady. I encourage you to come on the 30th. And then we've got Diva Yukatrek on the 6th of December. This is a 15-year-old gal who was named a Diana from the UK, a Diana Fellow at 14 for starting a diabetes effort. Her brother got childhood diabetes, and they work to raise the awareness about diabetes and families and how to work on it around the world. So she's a real inspiration, and please put that on your calendar. You're obviously going to hear from us about these things too, and you can sign up later on those things. Vinit, do you have
Sorry, you got muted, Kevin. Can't hear you.
Vineet, can you hear me? This is Ravi here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Saifullah has a question. He likes to know like how a younger audience can cope with peer pressure while transitioning from their salaried job to follow their passion, basically.
Exactly. I do have this question because, as you mentioned, transitioning from your salary-based job and feeling that money is God and all, and then going towards your passion and following what your dreams and desires are, moving from your comfort zone. This question pops up in my mind that how could a younger audience like those that are in their mid 20s or early 20s, how can they follow with this? It's very difficult for them. You know, as you said, we engage with a lot of media and social media and everything's all over the news, and we have to follow trends and keep up with trends. So it's very difficult to take this decision, and it's actually a very emotional process because people these days, especially the youth, seek a lot of validation. And how do we cope with that?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question, and I'm not sure if I can say that there are easy answers, but I'll just give you a perspective again. So, for example, I was speaking to one of the younger persons who was about to complete her post graduation. That means she would have been about 23 years old. And I was talking to her and I was saying, okay, what do you want to do in your life? She said that I want to work like a dog till I'm 30 years old, earn a lot of money, and then retire. And it doesn't matter what I work on because my major objective is that I should be able to just earn that much money that I can retire. I said, okay, great point. Now, you're saying that you want to retire at the age of 30, and the way the medical science is progressing, you will definitely live to be the age of 100. So, are you saying that you have some kind of a grand plan in place for 70 years of your life? So you want to just be a dog and do whatever you want as long as it gets you money without having any thought for what will really make you happy, what will fulfill you, and what will be joyful for you, and then spend the next 70 years trying to be joyful and not even knowing what it is. Now, to be fair to that girl, she actually took a break year after college and went on to try and discover what is it that she really wanted from her life. Now, taking a break year immediately after college puts up a lot of peer pressure, especially if you're doing very well intellectually. But to her credit, she decided to do that, and at least what she thereafter decided to do, well, she's now about 33 years old, going strong in what she is doing, liking what she is doing, enjoying what she is doing, is not necessarily thinking of retirement because the joys of retirement are perhaps to some extent already available to her. So I can't say that these decisions are very easy. The peer pressures will always remain. My objective as somebody who engages with the younger people is to help create the space in which their thinking can happen, in which at least the thought is seeded. It has to then germinate on its own. I mean, I can't be pushing them really.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And Wasim, thank you for that question from Pakistan. Great seeing you. Let me thank the Hope team. A lot of energy goes into these sessions. To the LeaderJam team, who's done a great job supporting technically this session. All of you from around the world. We have people in countries around the world joining us all the time. And last but very not least, Vinit, for your wisdom, for your work. It might have taken you some hours to get ready for this, but it took you years to develop all this wisdom, knowledge, frameworks. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you again soon.
Is that you, Kevin? Are you Kevin? I joined a little late.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Vineet. All right. Yep.
Very much so. Nice to meet you, Santosh.
Likewise.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Gratitude from my side too to Kevin and the team for putting this together beautifully. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. Yeah.